You are here at DUG4GOV. Just want to lead out, so to speak. I'm Ryan Dorheim. I'm hosting today. I'm actually a technology specialist or a TSP in the SMC SLG space. So if I am a new face to you, hi, nice to meet you. Um, for today's virtual meetup, we're actually going to spend a little bit of time going through a little bit of intro stuff, and then we're just going to do a kind of like introduction to the customer. But I want to give our speaker today and our customer the most time as humanly possible. Questions are always encouraged. For a little bit of etiquette, we always say like, hey, do a favor, raise a hand if you want to come off mute or put your question into chat. So I want to keep that rules of engagement going. And if you only have chat, then please forget about raising your hand. Then we'll get into a little bit of kind of Ask Microsoft, and then also wrap up for any other types of Q&A afterwards. So what is DUG? Well, DUG4GOV, actually DUG was started back in 1995. And has now since grown as a basic, overall user community for Dynamics. It's over 44,000 community members now, and there's a ton of different channels, and we just happen to be one of the channels that are sitting in this overall DUG meetup. DUG is free, so by all means, encourage your friends, people who care about other people, point them to DUG4GOV, especially when we're talking anything Power Platform or Dynamics related. So please keep that in mind. Additional rules for engagement. It's like, hey, what are the meetups? It's basically a place like this where you can come, watch a webinar, learn a little bit more about Dynamics and Power Platform, whether it be from, strictly users or all the way from our customers to Microsoft and even our partners and ISVs. Everyone in between, we're all welcome here because we all do learn from each other. And your interactions really, really do matter. So please feel free to connect with me or connect with Stephanie or connect with anyone in these DUG meetup sessions because we're here to help one another grow as human beings and also leverage technology to its greatest ability to make sure that we're always in some form of learning phase, but also modernization phase as well. Oh, hey, whoa, go back one here. So a lot of the programs that we see across the board here, not only some of the Dynamics programs such as Business Central or customer engagement. If you hear customer engagement, typically I'm thinking of anything customer service or field service or sales related for like economic development. Finance and supply chain, GP, and then also the Power Platform as well. You can see there's quite a few different communities out there. So if this one is interesting, please, there are quite a few others out there. Feel free to raise your phone, look at the QR code here, and continue to get connected throughout the entire DUG community. Some other announcements happening right now in Ohio is our F&O, CE, and BC meetup coming up on the 29th, which is already this, my goodness, Friday in Houston, Texas, is going to be also including Power Platform, including F&O, CE, and Business Central as well. Other dates to be mindful of coming up in September of 2024, Southeast US in Tampa. There will be more information to come soon, so please look at the website. Also in Canada in November, in Toronto, there will also be an event happening as well. So please, more information is coming soon. Look at the website. Dig around for what interests you or might be relevant to what you're hoping to achieve by connecting with us in the DUG4GOV group. And here we come in Chicago, DynamicsCon Live, May 2025. Go ahead and mark your calendars. And always keep these in mind. And as we think of for session submissions for the DynamicsCon happening in May, if you want to be a speaker, if you want to be, sorry, this is for November. If you want to be a speaker, or if you have sessions that you want to present, please feel free to reach out to anyone for the DynamicsCon virtual event happening on November. There will be more information coming soon, so please, if you want to attend in person, ask a local leader here for any other type of discount code. Apparently, there's even a 50% discount code, so feel free and ask more about that coming up, and we can certainly get you that information. So here we are. I wanted to speed through that and get us a little bit back on track with time, but I would love to take this opportunity to also introduce Jay Freeland. He is our guest speaker today. He's from the city of Redmond, Washington. I don't have, he's kind of elusive. I don't have a good picture of him, so this is about as good as we're going to get, I think. I tried to
really,
scrub
really
some.
accurate right there, Ryan. That's perfect.
I tried to scrub social media and everything else, and even his LinkedIn profile. I don't know. So we'll just pretend he's going to be elusive unless he chooses to come on camera. No pressure. But Jay is the business analyst project manager with the city of Redmond, Washington. And what really stuck out in one of the reasons why we wanted to connect with Jay on today's DUG4GOV Doug Meetup is literally they had to reimagine things moving forward from a technology perspective. I'll let him tell the story, so I'm not going to steal any of his thunder, but they went from on-prem into cloud and realized they had to rework quite a few things. Not only to, hey, let's, not only migrate from where we are up into the cloud, but also what else do we need to look at internally as we looked at changes or processes and workflows and things that happen internally. So Jay will be spending a little bit of time today talking more about that. So Jay, welcome.
Thank you very much. Let me get my screens ready. I have a lot of screens. Let's make sure this works well.
All right. When it looks like mine, then you're good to go.
Oh, yeah. That actually was confusing. But I now understand what happened.
All right. I'll stop
There we
sharing
go.
so that way you know when you're sharing. And we got your slides now.
Okay. Now, one more second because I won't be able to see if anything's happening. I'm going to move this over. All right. There we go. Okay. So yeah, thanks for having me talk. It's exciting to share what we did to go live with 365 and some of our experiences. So happy to be here. So we did rethink everything pretty much. I don't think we left too many stones unturned. And so one of the things that we wanted to talk about was how we selected 365. And I'm just going to be honest and say I wasn't here for that part. So I have sort of the lore of how we selected it. City of Redmond had been a Dynamics customer since 2011. They installed 2012. There's lots of cool stories about that installation process, and they were coding the last bits of government-specific code in our training room as they went live. So they had a very exciting go live. I'm glad that our more recent go live was less exciting. But they had been using Dynamics for 10, 11 years, and it had served them pretty well. And they started looking toward what was going to be next. They installed Dynamics 365 for budget planning only. And they used that for 2 budget cycles before the rest of the system was built out. And they liked the system for budget planning, but as a standalone, obviously it had its challenges. There's a lot of setup involved just to have one module running. And so it took quite a bit of work to get to the point of having everything in one place. So they decided that they did want to move forward with 365 as their financial system of record in 2019. And they set a couple goals. One was they didn't want to customize anything they didn't have to. I think that the 2012 system had a fair number of customizations, and they wanted to try to stay away from that because the city, even though it's an organization of 800 or so people, the finance team and the tech team in our IT department, they're relatively small, and they wanted to try to minimize that difficulty. They also decided that they wanted to
Doing okay?
Are we good?
Go ahead,
I
Jay.
think so. Bobby, yeah, mute your mic there, buddy.
So they decided they wanted to re-implement. They had some pain points in the existing system, and they thought they would be able to avoid bringing forward any of those issues if they re-implemented. And then another goal was they really wanted to see a better integration between the projects module and the GL. That had been an issue for them where they were not getting the two to be reconciled easily, and they wanted to see that work better. Leaving behind 2012 meant that the data had to go somewhere because we couldn't run that system indefinitely. And so we decided that we needed a data warehouse. This is about the point that I came in. And so our vendor had a warehouse solution that we could implement. And we decided to use Power BI as the reporting platform for the warehouse. Power BI is what we use in other areas of the city. And so it made sense to continue to use that. So this diagram is what 2012 lived in, the environment that it lived in when I showed up and when we started this project. So 2012 didn't exist in a bubble. There's a lot of connections, a lot of data being fed to it. We have several receiving systems where we bring money into the city. The city is interesting just because we have so many different types of systems for the different activities that we do. And so we had a lot of receiving systems, a lot of money coming in through them. We have a separate HR system that is on the older side, and we're actually going to be replacing. We had our existing budgeting process, which we were pulling data from our human resources system into the 365 system and then exporting the finished budget into 2012. We had a pro card system that was really antiquated. We had data coming from US Bank, which is our pro card provider. And then we had an Access database that was cleaning that data up and sending it into 2012. That was pretty old technology, and it was pretty manual and pretty cumbersome. Most of our travel was done manually on paper forms. We had sort of a mix of reporting platforms that had been tried out over the years and served different purposes. And then we have a lot of systems that keep track of fixed assets that were getting fed into 360 or into Dynamics 2012 manually with spreadsheets. So that's the environment it was in. There was a lot to map, a lot to know what was going on. And so in that, knowing all of those things, we came up with a plan for implementation. We decided we needed to re-implement the budget planning module to align with our goals for the rest of the core financials. So that went live in January of 2022. We do a biennium budget, so every 2 years we generate a budget, and we needed to have that for 2022 to do our 23-24 budget. And then we went live with our core financials in July of 2023. So we've been live with them for just over a year. We implemented general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, cash and bank in a fairly limited sense, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Procurement and sourcing, project management and accounting, and then we released our data warehouse at the same time. And the data warehouse incorporates data from both Dynamics 2012 and Dynamics 365. We are going to be releasing more functionality. I have more about it later, so we can sort of skip over it, but we're releasing things in kind of a rolling manner going forward. So we have fixed assets vendor collaboration. We have a bunch of new Power BI reports that we're working on, and then we have some other systems that we're working to build into the suite so that we're fully capable. So this is, sorry, drink of tea. This is our current setup, and let's see if we can zoom in a bit. So we still have a bunch of reseeding systems. That's not changed. We still have Dynamics 365 connected to our HR system, Eden, which is a Tyler product. We've simplified greatly our ProCard situation. So we have selected Concur to do our expense reporting. We use Whipfly to bring the data in to 365. We have our data warehouse where we're doing reporting in Power BI. And we've gotten rid of a bunch of older things that I still have this on here, of things that we don't use anymore. So this was kind of showing, the fact that we've simplified our process somewhat. It's still obviously a complicated environment for this to live in, and when we make changes, we always have to be aware of all of these things. So that's kind of a diagram that we go back to all the time. I don't know how they kind of functioned without that before I showed up, but this is, we pull this thing out basically weekly. So when we were going live, there were a few things that we had in place for go live, and then we had obviously some goals that we set out past go live, like the fixed assets and the vendor collaboration. So for integrations, we had to have our payroll import and our permitting system, bringing in receivables. So we had a custom logic app built by our vendor. We had to have our expenses coming in. So we have an ISV Whipfly brings in our Concur expense reports. The Whipfly is a two-way thing. There's actually two products. There's a bidirectional sync, which brings our accounting information into Concur, and then the Expense Connect, which downloads our reports into 365. And then we have our data warehouse, and that has updates from 2012 and 365 on a daily basis. Obviously, once 2012 is completely out of use, that will become static data, but for now, it still gets updated. And then Dynamics 365 data comes in every night. So those integrations all had to be set up for go live. We try to keep customizations to a minimum. So the obviously, reports had to be customized. Our check had to be customized. Our collection letters, purchase order, the customer invoice. We have a positive pay file, and then we have an AP check register that we have customized, which we use for audit purposes and also reporting to our city council. So those are all reports that were customized. We did also add a vendor column to our voucher transactions inquiry screen, so you can see the vendor there. That was something that we had in 2012 and people liked and wanted, so we had that done. And then we built about 15 Power BI reports that replaced reports that we had out of 2012 and other systems, and were kind of deemed required for go live. We had to have them. And then there's a bunch more that we're working on that were, I guess, nice to have, sort of, or at least not critical for the first year. So we went live in July of 2023. It went very smoothly. We had planned the downtime, specific days. We transitioned during that time. We did our training plan because we decided to train all of our users, retrain all of our users. We had to get that done in time. That worked out okay. We loaded our data that went in ahead of schedule, so we actually had time to sort of double check things before we went live. And then our first week, we had 35 tickets, but they were mostly permissions issues and some training issues. So that was all very smooth. The things that didn't go well in the weeks after go live, we had workflow escalation built into our workflows, and it tested okay, but it didn't work the way we thought it was going to when it was in production. I think our testing was maybe optimistic, or I'm not sure exactly. I think we would want to expand how we did that testing. The world, we kind of have a better idea of how to do that now, I think. We had the spending limits matrix set up in 2012, and we tried to transfer that into 365, but it really works differently in 365, and it just didn't work the way we thought it was going to. So we have a different solution for that in place, and I'll talk about it in a minute. And then we also came to the conclusion that the user roles that we had defined, which were somewhat informed by 2012, really weren't aligning with what we have for licensing. And so we had to work through our user roles and redefine them pretty significantly, to make sure that we could align with what our licensing is. So after we went live, we did some customizations. We changed our workflow to have the escalation start from the work item owner, which is not an option natively. You can start from the submitter typically, but not the work item owner. And we have that's based because our financial system is based on department budget owners, and they are approving expenditures on their budget. They may not be the supervisor of the person making that purchase. So just using a straight up hierarchy doesn't work for the way we manage our funds. And so having it based on the work item owner allows us the flexibility to send a work item approval to an appropriate budget owner and then escalate from there instead of escalating from the submitter. We also did a small customization where natively, when you have an AP invoice, it will, and you put in the number of the invoice, it will check the posted AP invoices to see if it's a repeat, but it won't check if there's the same number in the pending invoices. So we actually ran into a problem of having pending invoices duplicated in the pending area, and then when they posted, we were getting errors. So we had a customization built that checks both. It basically checks in both places. It checks in posted and in pending if you have an AP invoice with the same number for the same vendor, and that's worked fine. It's been great.
That's a good catch. Way to go, Jay.
We also we were trying to do three-way match. We pulled back from that. Because of that, we wanted the AP invoice to default to ordered quantity. So that's a really small customization, but when they open up an invoice, a new invoice, it defaults to ordered quantity. It just makes their life easier because they were having to select it for every single invoice. Then another sort of bigger one that's workflow related is in our budgeting process, we use workflow to move our budget plans through the process. Our budgeting process is really long. It takes months. And we needed the financial analyst to be able to pick up any of the budget plans, make edits, and then move it on to the next stage. So we have a customization that allows the submitter of a budget plan to be the approver. When our vendor customized that, they actually, instead of just working on just the budget planning module, they actually just set a parameter on all workflows. So we actually have the ability to make any individual workflow allow the submitter to be the approver. We probably won't use that except in budget planning, but it's kind of a cool way to do it. Normally there's just the one switch that makes that decision for all your workflows in the system, and this parameterizes it for the entire list of workflows. And then we have just added a new field to our projects that lets us control whether or not the project shows up in our timekeeping system. And we haven't made that live yet. It's in testing right now. But that is related to how we manage our payroll. And so we have a lot of people who tie their time to different projects, and whether or not the project shows up in that timekeeping system is currently manual. And this will put it in the hands of the people who manage those projects. They'll be able to control if people are charging labor to their project or not. So those are the ones that we have changed since. So it's not too bad. I think because we want to keep customizations to a minimum, I'm always trying to balance, do we do a customization here, or do we change our business process. And I think at the moment, I feel pretty good about what we've customized, that we haven't I feel like there's a tipping point, right? That you could customize too much, but I feel pretty good about where we're at. I'm not exactly sure, when it becomes too much, but I'm very aware of the testing burden that these things place on us. So that's something I'm always thinking about. So obviously these projects are really difficult to do. They're really time consuming. They use a lot of resources at your organization. Some of these things were really easy to do, and some of them were harder. So the easy things, we didn't change our GL setup, and not very significantly. And that was because it was a pretty straight shot between the two systems. That was pretty straightforward, pretty easy to validate. Not a lot of difficulty in shifting. And reconciliation was obviously easy because they look the same. So that was really good. Accounts payable and receivable, the process that's built into 365 is pretty standard. Pretty much what we had. We didn't really have to modify too much. So that was a relatively easy fit. We didn't have to do anything really crazy. And then we added the project numbers as a financial dimension. And it had a huge impact on the quality of our data, but it was not actually the hardest thing to implement. It was actually pretty easy to make that a financial dimension and make that part of what we do. And it's been probably, if you talk to my boss, the director of finance, I think that's her favorite update in the new system, because it brings so much clarity to where project funds are living and the ease of moving between the general ledger and the project module and knowing that everything is in alignment. So it was not too difficult to install, and it has worked really great. So we had some stuff that was harder to do, that took more effort. And I think, I don't think there's any way to make it easier. I think some of these things just take a lot of people spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to do it. Our go live scheduling was really hard to figure out. We have payroll, we have our pro card system and the dates involved in that. We have other activities happening in our organization, and just trying to schedule the go live was really, really very difficult, and took a lot of planning. In the end, it worked out great, but it was not easy to do. We redefined how we use our project module. We redid our numbers. We set up a new methodology of structuring our projects that involved investment projects and time and material projects, where we used to only use time and material. And we decided to make our project budgets more closer to real life. And all of those things really took a huge investment in time from our project teams and from the technical side and from our vendor. We invested a huge amount of time. The product has been really great. The way that we have our project structured gives us the kind of financial reporting we need. But getting, and if you look at it today, you're like, okay, well, that's not that complicated. But getting everybody on board with how that was going to work, and answering all the questions about how that was going to work and how that was going to report out, that was very time consuming and took a lot of effort. We reworked our advanced rules. We had a smattering of advanced rules in the GL that kind of addressed problems that they'd had in the past. And when we moved to the new system, we wanted a more comprehensive approach. So in expense, especially, we moved from having a lot of advanced rules to having very few, but we now have an account configuration that defines our approved account strings. Though that has worked great, and it's much easier to manage than the advanced rules, and there's much less concern about making edits in there because advanced rules had caused some difficulties in our old system. But just trying to figure that out was brutal. And basically, I worked with one of our financial planners, and the two of us sorted out what the account configuration needed to be for go live. And then we kind of made adjustments as we went. And I'm really happy with it, but it was very intense, very detailed work to figure out what that should look like and how to make it work in the system. The logic around the account configuration is sort of brutally honest of moving left to right through your account string, and you can't really mess it up because it'll tell you you're wrong very, very fast. We reworked our workflows. That was pretty brutal. The workflows are really detailed. The emails especially are difficult to manage. They have a lot of data in them. And it took us quite a while to get those where we wanted them to be. And actually a year later, we're doing a revise of all of our workflows. Not only sort of the content, which we have reworked, adding the escalation, but also we've reworked all of the naming of the workflows so that we can keep track of them better in the interface. So Sophie, who's on the call, and I, just to keep track of which workflows do what, the naming of them has all been redone so that we have a consistent approach and we can tell what part of the workflow they are just by the name. So I'm looking forward to having that done. It'll be a big improvement. I will say that all of those customized reports that we did, the checks, the collection letters, the customer invoice, all of that took a really long time. It's really detailed work. You're adjusting pixels on the printed page, printing it in multiple formats, PDF and through printers. And we have a dedicated check printer, so we had to print our checks through that. We sent checks to our bank probably about a dozen times to have them validated. Anytime we touched it, basically, anytime we moved it to a new environment, we would have the checks validated to make sure that they were going to cash. And so that was really labor intensive. And I guess I would know that going in next time, but that took a lot of time. And it's kind of exhausting, to be honest. Then lastly, revising the permissions was really challenging. It took Sophie and I a long time to do that work. It took us a lot of testing to make sure we got it right. And paring those roles down to meet our licensing was a pretty big investment in time. As an organization, I think some of the things that we did were pretty hard too. We moved to having POs for almost everything. And that was hard for the groups to absorb that work. It's been a really big improvement. And I think we're all really happy we did that. But that was a hard thing to be absorbed in the departments that create purchase recs and purchase orders. Implementing a regimented training program where one didn't exist before was not that easy. So telling people for the first time, you can't have access until you get trained, and you have 3 hours of training ahead of you before you have access. That has been a little shocking to people. I think that is, we're past that now. People are now expecting that their new employee will have to go through training. We have offered some different modalities for people to be trained to sort of let them have some choices in the matter, but they don't get into the system until they've been trained. And that's a big change that we didn't have before. We have more restrictions on procure to pay, so you can't submit a purchase rec and also approve it. That was actually a thing in our old system, and that has meant that some teams have had to find somebody else to do some of the work because the budget owner was the person who was also submitting, and that worked in our old system, and we had limitations around it, but the new system doesn't allow it. And then we've had a few things where we've limited permissions, and there's been people who wanted access to certain things and they can't have it because it costs too much money. But overall, I think people understand that the licensing restrictions there's a financial impact, and they usually back off pretty quickly. So we did try some things that didn't work out so well. We tried to use 365 to do our pro card reconciliation. It didn't really work out on a couple levels. Managing the vendors was really problematic, and then licensing wise, it just wasn't going to make sense. what we did is we moved to Concur Expense, and we use Whipfly to bring our data into 365. We've been really happy with that solution. I think that customization was maybe kind of stretching a little too far. And I think that I am more aware of the implications of permissions on customizations as a result of that than I was before. I did come to this project without having used 365 before, so that, maybe other people, that's an obvious thing. That was something that we were not aware of at the time. The spending limits matrix, it just was really completely different from 2012 to 365. And we tried to use it, but in the end, what we ended up doing was eliminating it from the business process. Our purchasing process is robust enough that we just don't even really need it. So we're taking that out. And then we tried to do bank reconciliation, and the file from our bank just would not work. And we had some really good support from our vendor to try to make this work. And there's something about our bank file that doesn't work for what we're trying to do. They have, I understand, updated it, so we may try this again. The other thing is that the accounting team had been doing their reconciliation manually, and they're really okay with it. So, so it wasn't a must-have, and we were able to just say, you know what, we're not going to do that, and we didn't go live with it. So. We made most of our changes were really great, and so some of the things that we've really liked about what we did, the revised account configuration has been really easy to manage. We feel really good about the enforcement of our account strings, so we're getting good account strings coming through. And the other thing is, because it helps people build the account string in the interface as they're going through and doing their purchase rec, people like that they can feel confident that they're not making a mistake when they build their account string on what they're buying. So it's also been a user benefit. In procurement and sourcing, the protections around procure to pay, making sure that we're purchasing consistently, that we have segregation of responsibilities, that has been really great for us. I think we feel really good about the changes that we've made there. We revised our procurement categories. We use NAGP codes to categorize our commodities, but those are now behind the scenes, and people are using English descriptions. That list was really hard to come up with. Our purchasing team worked really hard to come up with a list of procurement categories that made sense, but we've been really happy with the results. The only thing that's not great about it is we have headers in there to separate the procurement categories, and there, unfortunately, you can select the header on your purchase rec. And I would love to be able to prevent that and make people select from the subheading, the sub items below the headers. But it's still going reasonably well. In project management and accounting, using the project as the dimension was game-changing for our financial planners. I think it's my boss's favorite thing probably in the system. It's giving them insight into revenue that's coming into their projects, and they can separate between one-time and ongoing, and it's really illuminated what's happening on our projects. And then the project setup that we worked on in the numbering system has been much better, and I think everyone's very pleased with it. The project numbering is also more consumable than what we had before, so it's easier for people to recognize the numbering system. In general system administration, we revise the workflows and they work better for what we do. There's also less maintenance than what we had before. We had a lot of places where people's names were in workflows, which is really awful. That's all gone. So that's been great. And even though the revised permissions were really hard to do, they actually, we've clarified them, and they're actually really easy to administer at this point. So we're happy with that. With expense reporting, obviously that's Concur, and then moving the data into Dynamics. That was a paper process during COVID. It was a PDF process. We have much better data quality in Dynamics, so reporting is just much better in Dynamics, and then Concur offers a lot of reporting. From an implementation standpoint, what was worth the money, what was worth doing, we hired a training consultant to actually create the training documentation and actually perform the training. And for an organization our size and the people that we had on the team, that was a great use of our funds. That was really helpful. And we use those training documents still. They're not necessarily perfect. I would like to work on modifying some things, but overall, it gave us a really good resource. And I think, considering what it costs to have the trainer and to pay, that cost was pretty minimal given what we benefit from. And then the other thing is that our vendor came on site for Go Live. And I imagine most people do that, but we were on the heels of the pandemic, so there were questions of that, and they were a tremendous help for us to be on the third floor in one of the conference rooms as a resource, able to walk around to somebody's desk. So we had people from our vendor HSO for 3 weeks, and it was worth every penny. What would we do differently? Well, the big thing for me is I would have loved to do process mapping, more extensive process mapping before we worked with our vendor. I think that is kind of always a good idea. And I think it's always hard for our organizations to absorb that work because it's time consuming. But I think it facilitates easier engagement. And I advocate at the city that we do that on other projects because I think it's important. We waited longer than I think we would have benefited from for adding supplemental staff to support our regular functions because our SMEs were still doing their day jobs while we tried to do this, and that it's a really big burden. And I think having supplemental staff come in earlier would have sped things along and probably not really been that much more expensive, to be honest. I mentioned that those reports were really hard to get set up. And part of it was we have a pretty complicated style manual from our communications department. And if I were to do it over again, I would go to communications ahead of time and ask them, is there a way I can do a style that fits the look that you want, but do it in a way that's more friendly to the system and more friendly to the customizations they need to do, because it was matching to their style manual, which it looks beautiful. It was just very time consuming. So I would actually probably go back to them and ask, hey, can we work on something that would be easier? And then lastly, I would suggest that you not implement during a global pandemic.
Not sure I understand
really,
your
Jay?
point about that one, Jay.
I mean, upside is we did it.
I know. You
can't deny that. We did it, but yeah, that was not fun. Okay, so in the future, we've got a bunch of work ahead of us. It's not over. We are releasing revised workflows with our escalation that we had to have modified. Those are coming out in the next couple weeks. We have our timekeeping integration for our projects. That's going to go live in the next few weeks. We have just started an engagement with our vendor on fixed assets and vendor collaboration. We're in the planning stages of those two. And we're also starting to work with them on additional Power BI reports for our finance team. So that's the balance of reports that we didn't go live with. They have a couple of really amazing Power BI resources. I think that this set of reports is going to kind of blow the old ones out of the water because we know so much more. So excited about that. The city has a couple big projects. We're going to be integrating with a new human resources system, and we're getting a construction management system that will integrate with our projects module. So those are really big projects that are coming down the pike. And then we're looking for an ACFR builder to support our accounting team for the annual audit. We're looking forward to looking at AP automation. We're in a better position to do that now than we would have been before. So that would be exciting to look into. Contract management is an issue that we want to work on. We have Tyler Cashiering as our cashiering system. It's actually working fine, but there's some additional payment types or additional types of payments we would like to receive into our cashiering system, and it can't really do that. So we're looking for something that would be able to absorb more of our receivables. And then we're looking at working with our bank to have them do bill pay. So we're reduce the number of checks that we're printing in-house. So that's the future. And then our wish list, and this is a little bit biased because I think that if you asked around the city, people would have a different wish list maybe. But one of the things that the way we're set up, our financial dimension, our department budgets are tied to people, to a worker. And for us, it would be great if we could tie it to a role that they're filling. And we're not set up that way. I don't know if there's a way we would be able to do that now or not, but it's something that I think would probably benefit us in the long run. I'm sure it has its own issues, but that's something I would like to think about. The workflows, it would be great if they updated the workflow interface. It's a little clunky. It definitely is a challenge to manage. The emails in particular, when you go to add in the fields, like if there could be some sort of dictionary of what the fields are that you can bring into an email would be amazing, because we've sort of been flying blind and trying to build those out to be useful to our customers. And it would be great to have a resource around those, and it would just be easy. It would be nice if the workflow was easier to manipulate. And then lastly, and I understand this is something that Microsoft is going to roll out, is better tools for managing permissions and licensing. We invest a lot of time into making sure we're meeting the licensing requirements and managing our permissions. And I would love to see some tools to help us do that. Even the reports that you can get currently out of the system kind of require a lot of manipulation to figure out where you're at, and if you're meeting your licensing demands. I just want to know when I need to buy a license. I don't mind buying it. I just want to know that I need to do that. So that's everything I have. That's sort of a summary of our project. I think we're all really happy with the outcome. We're happy it's over, let's be honest. And we're looking forward to the changes that we're making in the future. So, is there any questions?
Bum, bum, bum.
No questions. That's cool.
And we were chatting about this ahead of time too, and you've covered all the aspects, as from not only what was challenging, but also what was good as well, and even looking down the pipe of like, hey, what is next to come? Where else can we make advancements and things like that? And I mean, and you're feeling good with the direction everything is going. Is that an accurate statement, Jay?
Yeah, and overall, the general feeling about our financial system is positive, and so people are not frustrated by it. They're not annoyed that they have to deal with it. A lot of our internal users are only interacting with the financial system on it. They're not daily users. They use it once a week, or they use it. It's not their primary role to use that system. And the fact that they're able to navigate and do what they need to do, and they don't feel negative about it, is kind of a big deal, honestly. Because those people are, even though they're not using it every day, we really need them to engage with it and be accurate about what they're doing and know how to use it. So that's been really great. It's obviously the tools for the heavy day-to-day users are great, and they're happy with it and they become very familiar with it. But when you're doing something 30 times a day, you kind of get used to anything. It's the fact that the more casual user can deal with it. that has, I think, improved the overall feeling about the financial system. So,
Nice.
and I think the other thing is that we all, we all have to agree that this is how we're tracking our funds, and we feel good about it. And I think it's important for an organization like ours to have a positive feeling about their financial system. I mean, it's a lot of what we do is be responsible for the funds of the people who live and work and visit this city. And I think that this system has given us a lot of confidence that we have oversight.
Yeah. And it goes back to being able to tell that story, right? I mean, in government, we all need to be transparent, especially as money moves through government, whether it's from other funding or other sources, or from income and things like that. Usually, constituents want to know, how is this all being used? And now finally, having better tools to be able to tell and repeat the story of the good things that are happening, not only in the city of Redmond, but also, across the entire US and even our great friends to the north here, where it becomes more of a transparent story, right? And some of the exciting things that I get to see, just being in my particular role, is also looking at some of the other types of reporting capabilities, and being able to ask direct questions of your data, to be able to surface up answers with some generative AI, things that are going to be futuristically released into our overall product solutions. So it's really an exciting time. But I mean, I'm so actually honored and glad, because I think we all kind of poke fun every now and again at a little bit of the licensing. Just tell me what license I need to be able to do X, Y, and Z, and those things. And those reports are coming, and having better visibility into those. Hey, this security role requires this type of license when you're using this type of feature functionality. So we're making huge advancements moving forward, not only in that spirit of transparency, but being able to, tell better stories overall, to make sure you have a healthy ecosystem. So, Jay, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join. Is there any other questions? I've been watching the chat. Nothing is overly filtered in there, but now would be a great time, since we only have about 4 minutes left or so. If there's anything burning, maybe like one of those how-to questions, like, hey, this is what we're experiencing, and how did you resolve something very similar to that? See, one of my mentors in life told me to always count to 7 in your head and let the awkward silence be. So no, I actually will take over screen sharing here real quick. If no one is going to come off mute or populate something in chat, perhaps Stephanie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank
Hey,
you
I've
everyone
been
for
on.
joining.
Yeah,
My
I've
name
been
is
on.
Stephanie Kleiner, and I am a technical sales director here at Microsoft. And I'm again, thank you for taking the time. And Jay, thank you so much for your extremely informative presentation. I'm just going to present really quick, just a little advertisement for next week. So our
Ooh.
September session will be with the Virginia Department of Corrections, and we have their lead software engineer coming on to tell us how they were able to very quickly transform a vision they needed for a constituent-facing portal for the Virginia DOC within 3 weeks, and what that looked like for them and what they're getting out of it. So be on the lookout for the invitation to register for the event. We're just getting that put together right now. And I hope you'll join us for that session. So if there are not any other questions, I'm happy to wrap on behalf of the DUG4GOV meetup today. And again, I thank you for your time. Appreciate you taking it with us.
Thank you all.
Right on. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Jay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, y'all.